Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back down the rabbit hole. I am Monty Hook, and I'm in the studio in Bali getting laughed at by Mr Carl Massy. How are you, buddy?
Very good.
I don't know why you're laughing at me, but we've known each other for a few years now.
I reckon close to 10-ish.
Yeah.
First time we appeared on a webinar sort together.
And what I love is that we've had some, people know me as being the poster child for the anti-vax. Well, that's how it's kind of appearing, even though I'm not anti-vax, and we've had some pretty cool conversations over the time. We're
Absolutely.
pretty aligned in our thoughts. I brought you on today because you've got a new book coming out. It's out.
Yeah, it's out.
Decision Making Mastery. A little bit of background about you. Normally, this would be the first time I've ever read somebody's bio, just for you because I love you. Carl Massy, author of 5 books, a coach, expert, strategist, and teacher who is passionate about seeing people evolve into their fuller expressions of their unique selves. Australian Army Major. That's the unique one. And a consultant to multiple Olympic Games athletes. And you've been a personal trainer, corporate wellness trainer, keynote speaker, and have been the co-owner of a yoga center. So a lot of what you've done has been centered around health, wellness, personal development, human optimization, betterment for humanity, and all these good things. You've coached multi-millionaires, world champions, Olympic gold medalists, CEOs, entrepreneurs, and more. Does that sound about right? Does that wrap it up?
What age does that make me with all of that sort of stuff?
Well, the question that I
Did I put the age in there? I don't think I did.
The question I ask everybody is like, what are you known for?
I think that's changed and evolved over time. So definitely I talk about a period of time, 20 years, where it was very much about strategy, strategic stuff. So military for 14 years. And I wasn't working with athletes with the Olympic Games. I was a security consultant specialising in bomb management. So I find it quite comical that was my military background. And now I write books about happiness and health and all that sort of stuff. So that's been
Is that
the
because
transition.
you're happy you didn't blow yourself up?
I was actually the guy that would plan the stuff and then send people in that direction to cut wires and all that
That's
sort of
very
stuff.
interesting. I guess with that, you have to have a very, there's some personality traits that are going to be unique to that position, that situation, I imagine. Certainly discipline, certainly critical thinking, analytical thinking.
Yeah, I'll talk about that because that comes in alignment with the book. But I was just thinking about the discipline thing this morning as I was coming here, and I was thinking, I was in the military for 14 years, went through the Royal Military College Academy.
That's in Australia for people around the world.
And I was thinking it sort of molded my discipline, but I put my discipline down to my father. My father's 79 years old, still gets up at 4 a.m. in the morning or earlier, works out for at least an hour, then walks the dogs, comes back, might go for a walk with my mum. And he's like just down the line discipline. So I think I got brought up on that. And then the military molds that.
So he wasn't a military man?
He was a school teacher.
Oh, okay, same deal. It's from my memory anyway. Same deal. So look, we'll talk more about the book and what's in there and some things. But when
do we get controversial?
I wanted to ask you, just straight off the bat, let's just go straight down the rabbit hole.
Yeah.
What the fuck is going on in the world, Carl?
Yeah, it's an interesting one. And I was thinking about that briefly this morning because I think the people in the know have seen this thing coming for a period of decades.
Yeah.
Some of us think this thing just happened like that. Like one of my mentors, she's 80, got into the personal development space when she was in her early teens. So has been in this space for like 65 plus years. And she's been following David Icke for 30 years.
So professional conspiracy theorist, basically, according to what the media would describe.
Yeah.
Or, she's in reality a fortune teller.
Yeah, but her business, like she used to bring presenters from around the world to Australia and promote them there. Robert Kiyosaki is one of the names I remember. So she promoted his program. So a lot of people in that wellness space. But she's just been a voracious reader. So she just has read all their stuff. So she's like seeing this as signs coming along. Yeah. So I think there's been a lead up. I say in the personal development space, 1999 was my transition point. So reading a lot since then. So for me, pharmaceuticals, like I went off pharmaceuticals back in 2004. I had pneumonia, pleurisy, was on antibiotics, and then I had this beautiful experience with this amazing Greek doctor. So I was working in the Athens game. He had like 3 sections of 3 letters after his name, you know, super qualified. And I only got to meet him through a contact. And I sit down with him and he's like starting to talk about lifestyle stuff with me. He's had like a 45-minute hour conversation with me. Pleurisy is like an infection on the lining of the lungs. So it feels like it's rubbing up against the ribs. You know, ribs, how painful that show is. And he said to me, he said, look, if you're willing to just handle the pain, I'd even recommend you don't take painkillers. This thing will pass in a few days and that sort of stuff. So that was for me, that was the last time I took anything. I haven't taken an aspirin or anything like that since then. And that's when I started to become aware of that pharmaceutical industry and the potency cycle. And I studied hypnotherapy. I understand this. And I love hypnotherapy and marketing and, those things mashed together. So you've got an industry that touts things as science, which are just marketing slogans. So I've been seeing that for a while. So didn't surprise me too much, but parts of it have surprised me as to how many people have got drawn into the narrative. That is pretty fascinating.
So, I mean, obviously there's a lot of things going on. There's COVID, there's lockdowns, there's politics. There's a whole bunch of other things that people don't even know about, which are related.
Yeah.
But what's your favorite? Like, well, actually, another way. What's your least favorite? What's the one that makes you like the hair stand up on your?
And I'll tell you why. So one of the first training courses I did. So I graduated from the military college, went into Royal Australian Engineers. The first specialist training course I did was the Defence Against Nuclear, Biological and Chemical Weapons. Part of that training course, we were like going into, military practice gas chambers where they would let off CS gas and you had different PPE equipment on, so different protective equipment on. And I know you'd go into this gas chamber, they'd flick the switch and then they'd sing out gas, 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 and you'd put on these purpose-built military grade masks. And if you didn't have a good tight rubber seal, you'd be sucking this CS gas in, your nose would be running, eyes would be burning. So as soon as there was this talk around, putting a piece of cloth over your mouth to stop something.
What's CS gas?
I can't even remember.
It's like tear gas or something?
Yeah, very similar to tear gas. Very similar to tear gas. So it would wipe you out. And so this idea of a cloth mask, like stopping anything, for me is just so ludicrous. So to see that and to see people actually believe it, and I want to go and sort of poke my finger in sort of cavity spaces on people's masks. So that's my thing, and I know lockdowns don't work. Like, again, unless you can, seal everything up and you've got an air filtration system in, like someone sitting in an open air cafe in Bali, it's okay to take my mask off because I'm eating or whatever, but then they sit at home and they've got no mask on and it's exactly the same air.
Yeah, exactly.
It's hard to narrow it down to one.
It's either we're all wearing masks all the time or we're not. Like, if one person takes off their mask to take a sip of water, it ruins the whole thing.
The charade is broken. My thing is, when is the signal for the taking off of masks? It's now okay to take it off. You listen to a Dr. Zach Bush who says in the air alone there's 10 to the power of 30 viruses just in the air. So, if we buy into this for this story, like, do we wear masks for the rest of our lives? Yeah, and I think even bigger than that is what gets me, and my least favourite is just people's complicit nature of just wanting it to go away. They just comply because they just want it to go away. And I think that's the most dangerous thing. Like when people say,
I'll take the vaccine, not because I believe in it or don't believe in it, but because I want to get my life back to normal. Like that to me is the most dangerous attitude to have.
Yeah.
And if there are people at the top pulling strings, playing games, that's exactly what they want. That's exactly what they want.
Yeah, it's sad to see. And I was with an Indonesian yesterday. I had a massage, and the girl I asked her about whether she's getting a vaccine. She's like, no. And none of her family would get it. And I said to her, you're smart. She goes, no, I'm not smart. I said, look, I know people with degrees and masters and doctorates that don't have the intuitive sense that you know, like you intuitively know. Another Indonesian girl I talked to, she's pregnant. I said, are you going to get the vaccine? She's like, why would I get the vaccine? I'm pregnant. And I'm like, there are people around the world that are like pregnant who are getting vaccines. And like, these are...
Well, they were pregnant. That's a terrible joke.
Yeah, these are so-called, highly educated people. But, this is part of this decision-making thing is we've got away from this idea of critical thinking and away from the idea of, what's self-evident to me. And this is where I think people have lost it. And we can talk about what's happening at a brain level to cause that disconnection from the ability to access higher mind versus lower mind.
Yeah.
So
it surprises me how people understand the nature of how the media works. They understand, they've heard all the things about, the marketing tactics and how the media controls you, and they intellectually get it.
Yeah.
But when it comes to them thinking, have they been brainwashed or not, everybody thinks that they haven't been brainwashed. There's not a single person on this planet that's going to say, yeah, I've been brainwashed by the media, right?
Yeah.
But somebody's getting brainwashed, and most likely you.
Yeah. I think people think, they would lie about this. And, the media mainstream media would do this, but about something big and this important, I don't think they would lie.
And the other part about it, which I think is also part of the strategy, is because there's so many pieces to it. Like there's masks, there's virus, there's pandemic, there's child trafficking. There's so many different things happening, and the mind can't comprehend that maybe there is some link between it.
Yeah.
But the thing is, there doesn't have to be a link between it. But because there's so many things, people think it's too big. And the analogy I use is the vultures who swoop in once a lion's attacked. Well, they're not strategizing with the lions. They're not going to dinner beforehand and making some strategy about how we're going to attack this antelope. No, the vultures are just coming in, getting their own piece based on what's already there.
Yeah.
So there's people just taking advantage of the situation, and there's people taking advantage of that situation, and then more people just swoop in, then it becomes this big thing with multiple levels.
Yeah.
It doesn't need to be all connected.
Yeah. I tend to agree with that.
Yeah.
So there's different pieces and different parts popping up.
Yeah. So decision-making mastery, tell us more about
So one of the things, did formal studies through the military college in decision-making as an officer for 14 years, plenty of decision-making there, working with the Olympic Games and particularly in, I was anti-terrorism, so bomb management, so trying to work out how can we protect our venues, search them, and all of that sort of stuff.
So do they teach you decision-making in the military? Is that a standard thing to teach?
Yeah, it would be part of the training. I'd have to go back and look at the syllabus and that sort of stuff, but there was definitely...
some element of it. But especially
there's definitely formal training because it was even after the military college, you do formal training as you went up ranks scales. And there was a thing called the military appreciation process, which would be it would include a tabletop activity. It would sit down. It might be a day's worth of going through to try and work out what's the best decision if we're going to take that hill over there.
Yeah.
What's the best direction and formation and resources and all that sort of stuff. So there was very formal training and process in that sort of things. And then, working with the consulting with the Olympic Games and that sort of stuff, high stakes. So again, very much into making best decisions. And, one of the things I realised, and it was after a conversation I had with you on the beach one time walking here, because I wrote this through 2020 and I bumped into you a couple of times, was we can learn all this decision-making stuff, but there was also another thing they built into the training of us through the military, and that was the ability to react to a particular situation. So they would train us to, if this happens, do this. If this happens, do this.
So it's basically it's locking in your intuition, your instincts, basically. Yeah.
And again, the filtration process for certainly officer training to find the people who would actually go to the Royal Military College, and that was, maybe we started with 165, ended up with about 111. So weeding out the people who have, and this is what I think is one of the most important things with decision making, is the ability to stay calm. And this is where I think the world has gone a little bit bonkers, because the ability to make a good decision when you're in a fear state doesn't exist, because you've dropped down to midbrain or you've dropped down to lower brain, you're in the limbic brain. You don't have access to higher mind. You're sort of playing with lower mind.
Yeah.
So the ability to like stay calm and zen while the world is a bit messy allows you the opportunity and capacity to see a broad perspective.
Yeah.
So again, one of the key things to decision making is, as soon as we go into a fear state, we become tunnel-like in our vision, which is good if we're trying to solve a thing there. But if there's any complexity to it, we want to see from this perspective.
So when is the right time to? When is it right to make quick decisions, instant decisions, and when is it right to take your time making a decision?
Yeah, the first thing is the consequences. So if there's higher consequences, you want to take more time with it.
Yeah.
So you want to obviously, if there's too much time, you can get lost in that.
This is the reason I asked the question, is because where I think, and this is, it's happened for me many, many times. Sometimes when I find it difficult to make a decision, I end up getting caught in a loop of just thinking, and then complete analyzing the situation. And then I end up just confusing myself when in the start I could have just gone, okay, this is my decision. And it probably would have been a far better decision than all that bullshit
In the military, there was a term called the OODA loop. Yeah. And I think it came from fighter pilots doing their dogfights or whatever they do. It's observe, orient, decide, act.
Yeah.
And what we'd say is you could get caught inside the decision-making cycle. You're inside the OODA loop and you're spinning your wheels.
Yeah.
What I think is, and this is, I come from very structured, linear-based training, but, I've gone down the woo-woo path as well over the last 20 years, whether that's a spiritual, whether that's looking at energy work, whether that's quantum physics and all of that sort of thing. And even, I think the deeper you dig into topics, the closer you bump up into, I can call it source, but the thing that took the Big Bang and turned it into order. So that took chaos and turned it into order.
Well, you're really taking this rabbit hole now.
Yeah, I am, because one of the chapters I talk in there is about getting into the internal guidance system. Yep. So what I think is, the more we're tapped into that internal guidance system, and call it whatever you will, whether that's intuition, connection with source, connection with soul, there's a time when you make decisions and it just feels right. You feel it in every cell in your body, and you're just going, this is the right decision. It might take a bit of time to unfuck whatever you've created, but in the moment of making the decision, you go, this is the right decision.
Just to relate to that, I think everybody's had the experience where they've made a decision, and in hindsight, maybe they shouldn't have made that decision, but had they listened to their own values, had they knew their own values, and they would say, I didn't follow my own values and I made a decision that wasn't in alignment with my values and ended up being the wrong decision.
Absolutely.
If you made a decision every time that was in alignment with your values, well, that's tuning into what you're talking about.
Yeah, and deeper down, because there's beliefs and, you want to go deeper down values, and then there's, really core values. So we can tell stories enough and believe a value based on someone else's implant of that. So we need to do the inner work to really get clear on our values. One of the stories for me was when I first came to Bali, and I'd done this 20 years, and, in the field I was in, which was specialized, I was probably in the top 50 in the world at what I did. So you come from that. So I'm thinking I know my shit. And I did a podcast about this the other day, and it was the bias of high performers in thinking that they know how to do
basically
a whole bunch of stuff.
So basically, it's people thinking their shit don't stink. Right. Okay.
So I knew I was capable of doing things. So I came to Bali, and I, had a decent wad of cash, and I wanted to transition into this, let's call it entrepreneurial, but carving my own path and that sort of thing. Hindsight, what I'd do again is I'd grab a hold of a business coach to work with for a year, because I'd only ever worked for the man before, and I never realised that the gap between working for the man and running your own business is the size of the Grand Friggin' Canyon. Yeah,
but also it's because, and maybe it was around that, maybe it's different at that time, but certainly now everybody's sold on. Anybody can be an entrepreneur in 5 minutes, and you can start an Amazon business, and in 37 days you'll be a millionaire, right? But like you're saying, there is a gap to go from. Yeah. So that somebody could be really brilliant in their job, in their career. They could be the world's best web developer. Yeah. But then put them in a different context.
Absolutely. So this is part of deeper again. Like, my goal in life is to evolve my consciousness. So, as we go into deeper levels of consciousness, then we become more aware of these bigger things. And one of the hallmarks of a heightened level of consciousness is humility. The ability to say, I actually don't know this stuff. I'm really good at this other stuff, but I don't know this. So I came to Bali, and I decided to get involved in this business. And I'd originally decided I was going to buy a villa. I'd seen a mate of mine. We're working in Qatar in the Middle East at the time, consulting there. This mate had bought a shit hot villa for $85,000 US at the time. This is back in 2006, 2007. And I'm like, I want a piece of that. So I've come here with the intention of buying a villa. And then a friend of a friend introduced me to this guy, and I ended up getting involved in this project. And he was a damn good used car salesman. And so I got involved in this project, which on paper looked good. And this is, decisions. Like, on paper it looks good. So intellectualizing looks good. Stomach is telling me, this guy is pretty shallow. He only wants to hang out with good-looking young chicks. So do I want to be in a business where the person who's leading the project is most conscious about the look of it, but has no clue or intention to put effort into the functionality of that thing? So I've gone into this business, and it was just an absolute disaster. So it was a boutique backpackers in Legian. We had Balinese partners because it was loosely put together, the legal framework, the company structure, blew all my cash. I reckon 5 years of pain. But I put that down. I'm the optimist, but I'm a strategic optimist. You needed this book
20 years ago.
Well, that's what created the book.
Yeah.
So, for me, it was listening to this thing and trusting that thing. And I've worked with a lot of sort of A-type women before, and what I've called it is logicalizing. So I think women are intuitively better than men. They're more tuned in, plugged in, feeling wise, aware of what's going on. But a lot of women have taken on as they've sort of gone down the professional path, and as this feeling comes up, they sort of make it subservient to the intellectual. So they intellectualize and say, no, that doesn't make sense because I've got a freaking good plan here.
Yeah.
So as an optimist, that was my MBA.
Yeah. So how, actually, I was going to ask you one question, but referring back to the military, I heard this, I don't know where I heard this, and I'm probably paraphrasing, but what I heard was that in the Navy SEALs in the USA, when they make a decision when they've got 70% of the intelligence, right? And 95% of the time they get the decision right with only 70% of the intelligence. And that was really, I find that very, very interesting, because what it points to is you don't have to wait for all the answers. You don't have to wait for everything. But when you've got the bulk of the intelligence, well, just make a decision and move on, and you'll get it right most of the time.
And they also have the belief that I can figure this stuff out if something pops up along the way.
That's probably,
which comes down to selection of character.
Ooh, this is interesting because
this comes down to selection of character and training, which I say, two important parts that provide a level of foundation on top of intelligent decision making.
So is that what stops people making confident, quick decisions, is that they don't believe in their ability to follow through or to fix it or adapt if something goes wrong?
Yeah, and maybe they haven't had the experience of figuring stuff out along the way. So, you know, as you've gone through, as you've had those failed businesses, those things go wrong, if you use those as tools of growth, stepping stones of growth, and say, what can I learn out of this?
Yeah.
So this is one of my challenges working with clients. So if they have a painful experience, the first thing they want to do is run away from it. And what I want to do is, there's a saying that says, you know, history without the emotion is potential wisdom. So what I want to do is I want to take them in a non-emotive, put them in a non-emotive state, take them back, put the lens of curiosity in to learn that. And so that learning provides growth and provides strength and stability to the foundation, that 70% foundation that says, yes, I can work my way through this because I'm learning and growing through every experience. Yeah,
I mean, my personal experience has been, it's just always been better to make quick decisions because I get it right most of the time, you know, and I usually get it right when I'm acting quickly. It's when I lament in it and like getting in that loop. Is that's when it I end up making a bad decision. So, and I think in entrepreneurship especially, it is very, very useful to be able to make quick decisions. Even if you know there's a chance you're going to fuck it up. I think it's just better to have that ability to make quick decisions. And obviously, it depends on the situation.
I'm not a, you know, one size fits all. So I'm like, in some situations that's best. In some situations it's best to do this. For this particular person, it's best to do this in this particular way. So it's for each person to find out what works for them. I would say you've got experience. And you've got intuition. And you don't even realise the strength of that intuitive sense that you've got in making that quick decision. You know, these Navy SEALs have got that training and they've got that intuitive sense. And, you know, who's that guy, Jocko?
Jocko Willink.
Yeah, that does the channeling or the...
Oh, no, I was thinking of someone else,
So he's like, you know, former, I think he's Navy SEALs or Delta Force or whatever, but he is getting into the channeling space where he can distant view things and that sort of stuff. So he's in the truth movement, that sort of stuff. So, you know, he was saying there was a lot of times where he was, you know, with the team and the team realised that his intuitive sense was heightened at a level to theirs. Like he was plugged in to the quantum field and he could feel what was going on. So I think we own... Look, this is one of the things where I think we've went off course in this, you know, technocracy and that sort of stuff. I think we've got too far away from realising the magnificence of, you know, the human as they're standing in their power and that sort of thing. And that's where I want to get to. Like one of the projects I'm playing around at the moment is the 21st century natural superhuman. You know, what are the archetypes that, you know, bring that to the fore? And that's where I think, you know, this entrepreneur, if they're like, you know, letting the best of them come out, letting a bit of that doubt float to the back of their mind and be willing to make mistakes and reframing mistakes. So that mistake is a mistake, it's feedback. When we get to that place, it doesn't matter if you make a mistake.
And that's why I say, I think it's, for me anyway, it's better to make quick decisions because then I can just, then also I'm more willing to move on when I fucked it up. Like if I can make a quick decision, then if I mess it up, well, I can move on quickly. Like, all right, well, let's just keep moving. Lesson in the bank. Now I won't do that again.
Well, my only caveat on that would say, depending on the level of consequence, you know, there might be times where the consequences are so high you need to take a step back and let something sort of sit and digest. Now, that doesn't mean spin it up here. That means forget it, surrender it, come back the next day and see how does it sit, that decision. So that might be a bit of a check-in. You know, I talk about...
So do you have a process for decision making? Like, I mean, so as an example, like one thing that I would do is if I've got a business decision that I've got to make, I I'll just write down everything. I'll just brain dump everything. Like I'll write down all my notes. I'll do spreadsheets. I'll like run different scenarios and I'll get it all on paper. Once it's all done, then, you know, I might look at it for a little bit, but then, all right, I'm going to make a decision. Yep. That's my process. Just brain dump everything. And then that way I know what I'm working with.
Yeah. I mean, if you want to be more structured with it, it's like, it comes down to what state am I in when I'm making that decision. So I'm big on, you know, what's my physical state? Am I dehydrated? Am I tired? Am I hungry? I don't make decisions when I'm in that state.
That's probably why most people make shit decisions.
Exactly.
Because a lot of people are unhealthy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, you know, there's that piece. Am I in the right emotional state to make this decision at the level I want to make it based on, you know, these consequences? The other one is, do I have the high quality intelligence, information to make the decision I need to make? And where I think people are having a challenge at the moment is their level of discernment is low. Our level of discernment is low if we're in a fearful state of mind. Our level of discernment is high. We're in a calm, relaxed state. We're able to sense truth. When we're sort of, you know, flustered or tired, hungry, whatever, whenever we're not at our best, we have less capability to discern truth. So we might be in our decision-making process using information which we think is fact, which is really assumption and maybe a poor assumption or maybe even a non-fact.
Yeah. So, and this also comes back to, I think what can give people confidence is like what you said before, have a mentor, have a coach, work with somebody. We just did a tour of Lighthouse, which is going to be Lighthouse, and I'll just let people know. Lighthouse is studios, high-end podcast video production studios that we're building here in Bali. We've got a workspace, a bar and a cafe. It's going to be the best place in the world to come and
stuff. I'm pumped.
Shoot your content.
I'm pumped.
However, I'm not here to sell Lighthouse. I am, but you just came in and did a tour, and I was introduced to a guy there who's a hospitality consultant. Now, I am fully aware that I am not an expert in hospitality. There's some things in business I know I am very, very good at. I know what my lane is. Yeah. That is not my lane. Yeah. And I could sit there and try to come up with all the ideas, but the way my mind works now is I would rather, knowing what I know now, like you said before, if you had that hindsight, you would pay a business coach a year, spend the $10,000, $20,000, whatever it costs you, and you'll be however many $100,000 better off for it, and without the 5 years of pain, right?
Without the hemorrhoids.
But that to me is now just from years of experience, and maybe I've got better resources to do that now. So now I'm like, I wouldn't try to figure out all the aspects of hospitality. I'll have some input and I know what I like and I'm going to feel into what's right. Yeah. But I'm going to bring somebody in who's one of the best consultants to map everything out, work on the concept, work on the food, work on the systems, the team, everything. And I'll be part of that process and I might become an expert over time. I don't know. But I'm not interested in putting myself under that level of pressure to make decisions that I know that is not my expertise. Yeah. So I think this is where a lot of people go wrong as well. And I think the reason is because it costs money to pay for quality, right? And when
that's the logical reason. I've got another theory and thought.
You'll lose money if you don't spend it. Yeah. But if you're in a position where, okay, well, I might have to spend $5,000 on this consultant or $10,000 on this coach or whatever the situation is. I mean, that's not that easy to do. You've got to take money out of your pocket and go, well, now I'm, for a short amount of time, I've got $10,000 less in my bank account and that might affect my lifestyle for a period of time. Yeah. And I think that is the basis of why a lot of people make such shit decisions.
And I think that, I've got a couple of points if I can remember the other point when I get to it. I think people play too much of the short-term game. Yeah. So, a lot of times if we stretch that timeline, it changes the whole decision-making process. If I compress that increases the stress level. And if it increases the stress level, it decreases my brain power because I start operating from my midbrain, that sort of stuff. I want to operate from higher brain. So that's one of the things, I might work with a client and I say, let's just stretch the timeline. Let's just double it.
Yeah.
We're trying to do this in 12 months. Let's do it in 2 years. 30 years down the track, does it matter whether it took 2 years or 1 year? So that's one of it. The other bit I want to touch on down the rabbit hole again is, this is a great practical book, and I've read hundreds of books, and one of my favorites, and I've just read it for the third time, is Power versus Force, looking at levels of consciousness. So another thing that stops people from asking for help is this thing called ego and this thing called pride. And pride is actually, still within the level of lower mind. It's not sort of in an elevated.
It's down there with shame and guilt.
Yeah, like it's in that space. The line of crossing when you start going into the higher mind is actually courage. And the courage to say,
humility,
I actually don't know.
Humility, yeah.
I don't know this stuff. Like, talking hotels, like boutique backpackers, what do I know about how many bed spaces you need to? I've, brought a couple of friends along that are in the asset management with hotels, and they've come and looked, and we had like a yoga studio there, and they're like, turn that into a dorm room. Like within about 5 seconds of just looking, you don't have enough beds here, turn that into a dorm room. Ego's caught up in it. It took about a year for the dude running the project to say, let's convert that into a dorm room, and that suddenly changed the profit.
Yeah. And on the situation that I have right now with Lighthouse is it's a pretty big project, and we're building things with a lot of soundproofing, and there's a lot of things. So the amount of money we're spending on construction is probably twice what somebody else might spend on the similar size space. And so I'm raising capital, I put in my own money, but then these other things keep popping up, right? And it's like, okay, now I realize I've got to spend money on a consultant for the hospitality. I don't know how much it's going to cost me, right? It depends on the time frame that we do it over. But, there's another $10,000, $15,000, $20,000. Okay, well, but I'm thinking that's going to hurt me short term. I've either got to raise more capital, I've got to find my own money, or I've got to give away equity, or something's got to happen there. But what is that going to look like in 5 years' time if I do that?
Yeah.
And what is the consequence of me not doing that? What is the consequence of me not doing that?
Yeah.
So let me find a way. Yeah. And the whole project has been like that and just blown up and blown up. Yeah. And it might be twice the budget. But the success of the business is just going to be far more locked in.
Yeah.
Because I'm just doing the best of the best.
Yeah. And the thought that came to mind then, and this again, one of the things that I say I'm great at is making things practical. I'm always trying to bring this back to practical. So one of the things too is choosing who you use as your advisors. So that is so important. So, in the range of coaching, there's, atrocious coaches to fantastic coaches. In the consulting game, there's atrocious to fantastic. So it's, yes, acknowledge that you do that, but then taking the time to discern who actually has the capacity, capability to deliver what you want to deliver at the right level. So again, you need to look at, are their values in alignment with me? Does their vision match me? Does their work ethic match me? Well, all of those things. So I think that's an important piece of the selection of those experts to come and support.
Yeah, and the number one thing I'd be looking at as the first screening, the first part of the screening is, have they done, and how many times have they done what I'm trying to achieve? Yeah. Simple as that. There's how many people are out there now teaching people about building 8-figure businesses that have never had a 6-figure income. It's like it blows my mind. Anyway, it is what it is.
I think this rushing things, and again, people not wanting to play the long-term game. I also think, we've got ourselves in the situation we are in 2021. And, this might be controversial, but I think we've got soft. And I think that's from a physical body, we could say we've got soft, people carrying more, body fat and that sort of stuff. I think, mentally, emotionally, with grit and that sort of stuff. So I think people's capacity to handle discomfort, and, any of us that, train in the gym know that our muscles aren't going to grow without the discomfort. So I think for entrepreneurs, the willingness to be able to, step into that space, acknowledging it's going to be tough work, hard work, and staying within that space and having the grit to, hang it out. And I think that's why a lot of people get spat out the back end in the entrepreneurial space.
But that humility piece is certainly important as well, because if I look back on my journey, I mean, I've been doing business since I was 8 years old. If I look at my business that I had in my 20s, which was kind of successful, right? I had like 4 staff and I had selling stuff, in multiple different countries, and I was making money. I was doing okay. I was never killing it. I was never going to grow. And the reason why is because I didn't have the humility to understand that I didn't have all the answers. I worked everything out to the best that I could at that time. Yeah. But for me to grow any further, I had to realize I need somebody smarter than me to come in and help me build it. Yeah. But that was a problem for me at the time. That's something that I had to learn, because that takes some pride and some, giving, putting your pride aside to go, I don't have all the answers. Let me bring somebody else in who's smarter than me. Yeah. Like that, that can take something. Now that's my default. Yeah. Now I'm like, if I'm the smartest person in the room, then just, kill me now. Right. So
this is why in this business and in life is this evolution beyond, being run and being held back by our ego, which keeps us in that pride, which we don't want to admit, or we don't want to be in a room and ask a stupid question. We want to be seen as the person who knows it. Yeah. I mean, it's a courageous person that gets asked a question that is in their field and they say, look, I don't know enough to comment on that. I can give you my, my 20 cents worth hypotheses.
Well, here's who I think you should go. Here's who I think you should go and talk to or learn from.
Absolutely. So I think that's going to serve people extremely well, is to let go of that ego attachment. And maybe we've picked up beliefs along the way that we need to do it ourselves, and that's how we're going to grow. Yeah. This is, I study neuro-linguistics programming, so I'm very particular about the words and languaging, and we get attached to sayings and we use them in every single context. Decision making for me is we have these skills plus conscious awareness. Conscious awareness allows me to, in that moment, see what's the reality, draw on everything I know and bring that and craft that for this unique experience in front of me. So, when we did the Olympics consulting, and I worked in Sydney Olympics, Salt Lake City. Then we came to Greece, and Greece, for anyone who's travelled in Greece, is a bit hodgepodge how they do things. It's like, so, trying to take the framework, the model that worked in the US and try to template over the top of it without modifying it for the environment would have failed. So part of our decision making is the conscious awareness. And I love this question of what's the reality? What's the reality brings you back to forefront of mind, frontal lobes, and what's the reality? Okay, let me look at the reality. And this is sometimes where the decision-making process might need to slow down. We might need to take a few breaths of air. We might need to look at.
Well, and what's occurring to me now is also questioning yourself, questioning your own expertise. Like, this is what I've done before. Yeah. That worked. Yeah. But why did it work there at that particular time? Yeah. And don't get caught up in, it worked fantastically there, it's automatically going to transfer over. Yeah. Like really having the curiosity to look at that and go, why might that not work here and now?
I love the word curiosity because I bring it up in the book, and there's a difference between judgment and curiosity. From an energetic level, something judging is very linear, right, wrong, good, bad, or otherwise. Curiosity is quantum. It's like looking at things from different angles, and it's a different vibrational frequency. It's more loose. It's more playful. It's like, why did I cock this up? How did I cock this up? What could I learn from that? What can I take?
There's no wrong. There's no wrong in curiosity.
Exactly. It's such a powerful piece. One of the things I realized over the course of writing this and prior to was this idea of knowledge plus experience equals wisdom. And I'd sort of been touting that for a while. And then I'm like, how if I've got the knowledge, I've got the experience, and yet I cock this thing up again, and then I cock it up. I'm like, what's the missing ingredient? Like that formula doesn't work. And I'm a deep thinker. I want to okay, what's the right formula? And the realization for me was that's potential wisdom. Experience and knowledge is potential wisdom. The thing that brings it into true wisdom, that makes it impactful in a moment, is the level of consciousness. So I need to, and this is why I talk so much about, self-care. When I'm in that conscious level of mind where I've got this broad perspective, where I'm plugged into the quantum universe, and when I'm in that space and I bang that together with my wisdom of knowledge experience, that's where I can create some magic from.
Yeah.
So that for me is where people fail in the decision making, is they haven't worked on their level of consciousness to be fully conscious of all the pieces and how it fits together.
Yeah, and this is also, this is the personal development and the unpacking of our own habits and why we are the way that we are. So the reason why I had issues in my 20s in business, getting to that, I hit that ceiling, is because I'd always done everything on my own.
Yeah.
Right now, but that worked for me.
Yeah.
As a teenager,
yeah,
as a young adult, that got me through life. That got me places. It was the very thing that had me so easily start businesses and open doors. That worked for me. But there's a ceiling to that, and then if you want to grow beyond that, you've got to actually unlearn all that. So that's where looking at myself, going, okay, why am I like that?
Yeah.
Unpacking, why did I learn those things and why is that now stuck in me?
Yeah.
And how do I unlearn that so that I can expand myself?
Evolution, baby.
Yeah.
So there's a thing in coaching where we say that what got us to this level is the thing holding us back from going to the next level.
Exactly.
So this is our evolution. So for me, intensity got me to the level of success, but I realized I hit the ceiling and it was creativity that was going to take me to the next level. I came from a very structured background, so I'd do presentations and I'd be very clear about what I was going to do. In the past, I might have come in with some notes of some key talking points and all that sort of stuff, but I've realized that is drop into the moment more and allow a bit more of that creative flow and take this thing wherever it needs to go. And I do have a spiritual belief and trust that the right stuff comes up at the right time in the right way, because I've seen it enough. And I work with clients and there'll just be something that comes to mind that I sort of drop in there and it'll just be a complete bombshell. I wouldn't have thought it through. Before the session, I might strategically go, we're going to take it in this direction, but then I just drop into being fully present in that moment. And that's why I think you can make quick decisions that are mostly right most of the time, because if you're fully present within that, there's, whether it's that intuitive piece, whether the internal guidance system.
I think in business and entrepreneurship, this comes back to this, making decisions around money is a very important conversation, because if I really think about it, there's a lot of decisions that I can make now where I don't have the fear of the money. That money, the financial aspect is not a thing for me now. Where I'm not saying it's not a thing. If I lost money, it would suck. Yeah. But there was a time when if I made a wrong decision and it affected me financially, it would be a massive impact. And the fear of that was the very thing that stopped me from making a decision or making the right decision. Now I don't have that. I've worked through that. And I guess that's two parts. One is, there is the tangible aspect of my life where, I've got resources, I've got money, I've got what I need. That gives me the confidence to make shit decisions and get it wrong. Yeah. But then there's the wisdom that I've developed through the years of making the right financial decisions. So,
and I reckon there's a third piece. I think it's letting go of the ego attachment to making that mistake.
Yeah.
And, not wanting to make that mistake or fear of making that mistake, which stops you from making any decisions because you're worried about what will people think of me.
Yeah.
And in this social media age, in the old days, I'm 51, in the old days you compared yourself to your neighbours and it was as big as you could pedal on your bicycle. That was your neighbourhood reach, your social comparison.
It's always
been there. These days
you're
comparing to someone on the other side of the planet
who's
given you a snapshot of their life in a nanosecond and you're judging based on their story that they're telling around that picture of
probably a fake profile anyway.
Yeah, so
yeah,
totally off course.
Let me ask a question. So you work with you've worked at the Olympic Games and you work with athletes. And what have you observed working with athletes or observing with, high performance athletes or entrepreneurs or high performance people? What are they doing to be in the top 1% of their field that the other 99% are not doing?
Yeah, I think it's big part is their work ethics. Like, I think it's grit and the ability to show up and do the work when no one else is doing the work. So I think that's it. And I see, I might follow some other high performers and I see that played out. They're willing to reach out to experts. So I've coached 2 women now to win world titles in water skiing. And, the first, recognise, and, she's got an awesome story and she wrote a book around it. She was number 2 in the world in her 20s and then realised as she was coming up, she was like 38, 39, she's getting close to 40 and she's going, I'm as fit as I was then. She was hardcore because she would train hard. She goes, I think I can actually get that number 1 spot because I'm smarter than I was. And she reached out and said, what I need help on is the psychological piece. How do I handle setbacks? So in the world titles, she was out in front in the first 2 and there was like 4 rounds. 3rd round, she sputtered in badly. And then come the 4th round. So it was the work that we did together that allowed her to psychologically let go of that 3rd round and come into that. So I think it's definitely grit. It's definitely looking for expertise. It's being willing to make mistakes and knowing that those are opportunities to learn and grow from. And, always consciously like looking at what do I need to do to improve this thing. I would do, for myself personally, I'd do a presentation and then at the end of the presentation, as I'm walking out, I'm already thinking about how I could have done it better. So these, high-level athletes, without judgment of self, which is ego-based, but with curiosity, they're looking at, what do I need to do to tweak this thing?
Yeah, and the word that comes to mind with that is observation over judgment. So if you made a mistake, if you fucked something up, if you could have done something better, what is the energy that you are sitting in with that event? Can you observe that and go, okay, all right, I can do that better, or are you in the state of judgment of yourself, like you fucked it up, like you idiot?
Yeah.
I think that's a very key distinction.
Yeah, well, that's a key distinction in life. So this book called Power versus Force by Dr. Hawkins, these levels of consciousness, like being able to move beyond ego-based living to this, and I call it love-based living. It's like when we let go of all of that stuff and get into that, that's when we are just like open-minded, like looking at this thing because we're curious about life. We're not driven by survival instincts, competition and all that sort of stuff. Like, a recent thing I heard about competition was old matey who came up with the idea of survival of the fittest, Darwin, like, another guy who had a hypothesis around the same time, presented it to the Science Society at the time. He was a commoner, whereas Darwin was a elitist, was in the upper class. So Darwin's thing was survival of the fittest, which definitely supports there's the people who were chosen into this thing. This other guy whose name was Wallace, I think it was based in Malaysia at the time. And what he said was evolution was based on the dying off of the weakest. Yeah. That's the thing. So the group actually keeps evolving up. It's not these people who are the competitors that are sowing their seed that are taking evolution up. It's the falling away of the weakest. Yeah. And that's life, and that's like the evolution of life. And again, we've gone down the rabbit hole of philosophies on life, this idea of, if you don't take care of yourself, like you might be part of this, you're passed out of the evolutionary cycle. Yeah. So it's not so much about competition. It's like, how can I fortify myself? How can I create that right community around me? How can I surround myself with these other people, draw on these other resources, and collectively, then we can rise together.
Yeah, I think the word that comes to mind is, sovereignty, and obviously that's a pretty popular word these days. And I think it's very, very potent because we do have to focus on our own power. And it's very easy to get caught up in, there's a lot of bad shit happening in the world and I want to help the world. And this is a very difficult concept for people to grasp, is that the way to help the collective, the way to help humanity, the way to help your fellow neighbor is to work on yourself. Absolutely. Now it's a very difficult concept for people to get their head around. How is that not selfish to ignore that person there that's suffering and look after worry about myself first? But I think a lot of the world's problem, the things that we're all dealing with, they go away when there's a critical mass of people who have that level of consciousness, we'll say.
This again, I've been reading this book, Power versus Force, and he talks about when someone raises their level of consciousness above that 200, that one person going above 200 is the equivalent of balancing out 100 that are below that level of consciousness.
I didn't know that.
So as we raise ourselves up, raise our level of consciousness, we're actually adding to the raising of consciousness. So, he talks about the level of humanity as a whole is slightly above this, but the population at large, like maybe 67%, I forget his numbers, is below the level of 200, but it's because of these other 33% or 30% that are above this level of consciousness that brings humanity as a collective above that consciousness level.
A rising tide lifts all boats.
Yeah, so it is. So, and this is, one of the things I've been working with my clients on of late is this radical self-care through this period of time, 2021. And this is, I think for everyone, this idea of what worked, pre-2020 in your self-care regime may not be enough in this moment where there's so much uncertainty, there's this energy, this heaviness, there's a lot of emotional turmoil.
I think there was also a lot of bad ideologies around self-care. I think there's a lot of things coming to the surface around, what that actually should look like.
Yeah.
What actually works for us and what doesn't. Like you shared the story of, you just went off pharmaceuticals and you've never touched it since. And I've had a pretty close relationship with that. I've never been vaccinated, and I pretty much say that on every episode. I love saying that. And I think that this comes back to, and the reason why I like this concept so much is because it brings the power back to you. When you can tell yourself that I don't need that pill, I don't need that person, I don't need that system, I don't need that government, I don't need that handout. When you are completely independent and within your power, that you don't need any of that, well,
unstoppable. That's superhuman, man. That's a superhuman that I want to have as the antithesis, whatever that word is. There's the technocracy going that way. I want to collectively get the community together and say, what is it that causes us to be these superhumans? Like, I'm doing a breathing pranayama practice at the moment, and I'm thankful for the yogis that, over the last few thousand years, came up with this system and this practice so that I can do it now. And it's allowing me to shift energy from my stomach, which is where we sit with, worry, fear, survival, and get it back up into my heart and that sort of stuff. So I think there's tools that we can take and use that allow us to tap more into that and bring us from this place. Because for me, and this is, very pertinent to entrepreneurs, is creativity is power. And creativity doesn't come from survival. It doesn't come from a survival state of mind. It comes from a higher state of mind. And when we can bring energy up into this space, when we can come from our heart, live life wholeheartedly, as Brené Brown talks about, when we come from that space, our creative powers go up as well. So I talk a lot in the decision-making process about firing up creativity, because that's the quantum leaping. It's beyond Newtonian.
Yeah, and it's beyond the ideas or the innovations that come out of the creativity. It's the collective energy of the people in the creativity that actually makes waves.
Yeah. And that's, these conversations, us having this, and with whoever's listening to it, there's a collective conversation going here. And again, we're sort of, raising this collective as well. There might be something that we say within this that, lights a spark in someone's mind, and they have a creative aha insight moment, which allows them to, transition up into that next level of their evolution.
And also, I think we underestimate the impact that we can have on other people, the inspiration that we can give to other people just by being in that state ourselves. Yeah. That's not something that we necessarily consciously are aware of. Yeah. But being in that superhuman state is very, very resonant. Yeah. Like on a energetic level. Yeah.
I had a beautiful experience on Sunday. So where I live, community-wise, they decided there's a community project. Road out the front of my place is all ripped up. They decided they were going to cement the road. So they collect the men from around, and there's about 20, mostly Balinese, and, I poke my head out because the project's right in front of me. And, I was trying to look at, how I fitted in. So I sort of stood off to the side looking, and I was interested in, where I could get. And one of the beautiful things, and I think I'm always observing and seeing patterns and signs and that sort of stuff. After the experience, one, I had this beautiful feeling of being part of a community thing. I didn't speak the language with them, but we've got a common cause and we come together. The other thing I realized was it was very chaotic at the start. And for me, that sort of ruffled my feathers, but it self-organized into the right people falling into the right roles. And just like life, I think we need to be more trusting of it reorganizing itself around us. So sometimes we think we need to have everything lined up, 100% of our plan together. Maybe we need to do the 70% and let this organicness happen around us. And that I think was the biggest transition point for me from the military when I dropped into understanding more about whether it's quantum physics or hypnotherapy or the NLP stuff. Was I come up with an awesome plan, but I know I've only got 70% of what's going to get me across the line. I open myself up to the ability of synchronicity and all of those little, feeds that come along the way. And I don't have decision paralysis at the 70%. I'm like, now I can move into that and I trust these things. But again, that might come from experience of, that having unfolded in the past. And it might be, if you haven't had the personal experience, finding those people who have had that experience that can walk you through that process as well.
I got a couple final questions for you. We've been going for more than an hour. It goes pretty fast.
I can talk under wet concrete. I forgot to tell you that bit.
We'll make sure everybody's got the link to check out the website and the book, and what's the best way people can find you?
Yeah, I'm crap at the social media thing. So I've got my website.
So it's Carl, CARL.
MASSY.
carlmassy.com.
And website there, go onto the contact page. I love getting asked questions, and I'm, there in service to humanity to answer whatever questions. I think that's a super practical book as far as giving you some other tools and ideas on how to pimp up your decision making.
And I think we've done a really elegant job of selling it through the process of this conversation.
It's sold through Amazon, but Amazon's not my thing. But from the book perspective, it still resonates at some level. Amazon came into the world as a book company, so I'm okay with.
Oh yeah, mine. I did the same thing. So, we'll make sure everybody's got the link to go check you out, and the links to social media. And I know you're not a big social guy, but we'll make sure everyone can check you out. One final question that I ask everybody, but before I do that, I just want to acknowledge you as well for the work that you're doing, and the way that what I like about you is you've got this ability. You've got this military background, very analytical discipline, and you've got this ability to weave that very subtly and elegantly with the woo-woo, as you called it. You do have this spiritual side, and you've got all that. And it's a good demonstration for people that these things can weave together and can live together. Yeah. So it's a beautiful example. So
the three, and this is what I'm exploring more in this program I'm looking at, is leader, warrior, sage. Yeah. When we bring those together, that is powerful stuff. So I'm putting together the framework of what that looks like. I want to teach people what it looks like and then how to bring out more of that in themselves. I haven't finalized this thing, but I'm working on, and I'm excited about, because I think that's powerful stuff.
Yeah, that's cool. No, I relate to that. Final question.
Yes.
And I ask this of everybody. If you had the one-time superpower of mental telepathy and you could share a message with all 7.8 billion people on the planet, whatever that number is now, one short, impactful message with every soul on the planet, what would that message be?
The message would be that you are so much more powerful than you've been led to believe. So, drop into that.
Ooh.
It's powerful.
Yeah, that's good. Nice way to finish, Carl. Very good.
Pleasure.
Is there a question that you wish I asked you? I've never asked this question. I just felt inspired to ask.
No. It's been a beautiful conversation. And again, I hope someone, even if you take just one piece out of this, the listeners, like, that's all, like, we need to, those little pieces can make such a difference, a pivotal piece of information, create a course correction. And if you're playing the long-term game, it can be 2 years down the track. You're like, because of that thing that Monty and Carl were talking about, I decided to make this decision, which is course corrected. Like, and know that magic is all around you.
Yeah, and there's a lesson in that comment to anybody who's an entrepreneur out there, is because, again, I think we underestimate the impact that we can have. Like, these conversations and the conversations that you are having, right? Like, people are going to get one little snippet of wisdom, or they're going to get some little thing that touches their heart. Don't underestimate the power of what those conversations are. But I think people, as entrepreneurs, get caught up in, I'm going to make this I'm going to do this big thing that changes the world. I'm going to create this course that changes the world. And no, your job is not to change the world. Your job is to create ripples.
Yeah.
Carl Massy, thank you very much.
Been an absolute pleasure.
Guys, go check out the book. Go check out his website. Follow him on social media. And
that I don't have.
That you don't have. And come and check out Lighthouse later in 2021. Follow me for that. I'll put a link in the bio so you can check out what we're doing at Lighthouse. Guys, thank you so much. And I'll see you next time back down the rabbit hole.